Speaking of Philadelphia, here are the Eagles. Started off here looking at what the Eagles, of course, last year, they had the best record in the NFL going into the month of December. And then is it an insult to saying of the phrase the wheels fell off for what happened with the Eagles? Is that an insult even to that phrase with how bad it was for the month of December and on?
It's pretty light, yeah.
The Eagles beat the Buffalo Bills on November 26th to go to 10-1. They only won one more game the rest of the season. They beat the Giants on Christmas. They were fortunate to do so, and that was it. A 1-5 end to the regular season. Just a beatdown loss at the hands of the Bucs in the playoffs as well. Just an embarrassing end to the season for the Eagles, where they had all these hopes. I know there were a lot of people that thought they were that last year's version of the Minnesota Vikings. They ended up being correct with the way that it all played out. There was question if Nick Sirianni would even stick around, Alex. And as we look at what they did to change the roster up this offseason a little bit, one of the big changes, as we expected, Brian Johnson is out as an offensive coordinator, as we expected.
Yep.
And Kellen Moore, now with Saquon Barkley at his disposal in the backfield, along with, of course, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith as your elite trio wide receiver quarterback. Kellen Moore, of course, takes over the offense now.
So very interesting thing to keep an eye out for is Kellen Moore loves the hurry-up, quick offense. We've seen that with him in the past, and the Eagles tried a little bit last year, so I expect this to be a more of an over team. Very good roster, top to bottom, especially on the offensive side. We know that Jalen Hurts has plenty of weapons, as you mentioned, A.J. Brown leading the way there. I don't see I could be wrong. Saquon Barkley, one of the best running backs in the league, no doubt. But, last year we saw them look very good with Gainwell and Swift in that spot. So not a huge upgrade for the running position. But, of course, we do, as I mentioned, Brown, Smith, and then we have Dallas Goedert there in the tight end. Another interesting angle, Jeff, is maybe we're going more with Saquon rushing touchdowns. Look for his over. And going less with Jalen Hurts in the push-tush because we have no Jason Kelce, of course, at center.
So I'm happy you brought up the tush-push because, of course, Jason Kelce retires. Cam Jurgens moves over from guard to center. Now, Tyler Steen will slide in and play that right guard. They actually kept the offensive line pretty well intact other than Kelce. Mulata's still there. Lane Johnson's still there. Landon Dickerson. All still there. Big contract for Dickerson in the offseason as well. They're all still there. And that is something to at least look at it. At least to me, I still consider this unit, even though they are aging, even with Jurgens moving the center.
Yep.
I think it is a very nice size downgrade with Jurgens and Steen as opposed to Kelce and Jurgens, even though Jurgens was a huge center prospect out of Nebraska when he got picked a few years ago. I'm curious to see if it is as effective, the tush-push. Now, when your quarterback, even though he's not the biggest in stature, is one of the strongest quarterbacks in the league in Jalen Hurts, you still have the ability to run it. Barkley-wise, I think the one dimension that Barkley gives this offense that with last year is he's just a better pass catcher than those guys. And
as we talked about yesterday with the Giants losing him.
Exactly. And I think that for the Giants, I get why they didn't pay him. You don't want to pay running backs. Barkley's contract was pretty affordable, all things considered, but I get why the Giants still didn't want to pay him double-digit money a year, double-digit millions a year. I get it. But you look at this from the Eagle perspective, they really got in trouble last year when Hurts started throwing the ball all over the place, started turning the ball over. There's also a question of, was Jalen Hurts even healthy by the end of last year? Of course, he was nursing that knee injury that may have progressively gotten worse, and they just didn't say much about it throughout the year. So I'm curious to see with that. Also, new backup quarterback as well. Kenny Pickett comes over from Pittsburgh. Mariota goes down I-95 to Washington. We'll get to him a little bit later. So new backup quarterback there. Defensively speaking, Fletcher Cox hangs him up. He retires. Hassan Reddick, contract dispute, traded up I-95 to the Jets. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, after 1 year in Detroit, comes back to hone up the secondary. And then Bryce Huff, who was one of the best sack guys in limited action with the Jets. They only really played him in pass rushing downs. gets a gigantic contract, about $17.5 million a year over 3 years, comes over to Philadelphia. They are going to play him more than he played in New York. He's going to be asked to play more downs. I'm curious to see how new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, who comes up from the Dolphins, handles this, because as we know, the Eagle defense was an abomination at the end of the year behind the inexplicable move to give Matt Patricia more power. He's not with the team anymore, which might be the best news of all for Eagle fans.
Fangio, a lot of experience in the NFL, of course, 33 seasons. Last year, looking at Miami's defense to kind of compare, 11th in yards allowed, 7th best in rush yards allowed, 15th in passing yards allowed. Compared to the Eagles, who were 26th in yards allowed in 2023, 11th in rushing, and 30th in passing. So hoping for a big upgrade here for their defense. Now, the thing is, they're very young. 4 of their 6 draft picks from Philadelphia were all on the defensive side of the ball, and they've been working on this, right? We had a 3rd-round pick in 2021. We had a round 1 pick, the 13th overall in Jordan Davis in 2022. So they've really been building this defense. The thing that is going to determine is just how well they mesh together, right? And the inexperience. But overall, I think they will be pretty good unit.
Again, with the Dolphin numbers from last year, they dealt with just a collection of injuries by the end of last year.
Yes, they did.
That was a defense the year before that was one of the worst in the NFL, and Fangio had them as a totally competent defense. I didn't think they were an elite defense by any stretch. But
11th in yards allowed. Yeah, it's pretty shocking when I looked it up.
Yeah, they were more than competent.
Yeah.
Now, again, I know some people, and this is what we have to remember. Some guys are just built to be coordinators and are not head coaches. We know Fangio's tenure as Broncos head coach wasn't particularly good. Doesn't look as bad after the Hackett debacle, but different story for a different time. But Fangio, through his career, has been one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, if not the best at some points of his career. And he is a massive upgrade over the fiasco that was last year, over Desai and Patricia there in Philadelphia. And I think that will really help Nick Sirianni be able to lean on his coordinators a little bit more, be able to trust his coordinators a little bit more.
Yes.
Remember, they lost both coordinators to head coaching jobs after they made the Super Bowl in the 2022 season.
Correct.
Jonathan Gannon, of course, went to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals were just a normal bad team as opposed to a historically bad team as the market thought they would be going into the year. And Shane Steichen lost his starting quarterback in week 3 and almost made the playoffs. So those guys were really good coaches. You just saw the downgrade where you had mediocre to bad coordinators, and the Eagles imploded last year at the end. Now they have, to me, Fangio's a top 5 defensive coordinator. Moore's a top 10 offensive coordinator. This team I expect to improve. Now, does that mean necessarily that they'll improve record-wise? Because they won 11 games last year. It's just that the melt happened, and we really only remember that. I don't know. I don't know if they'll actually get better win-loss lines. But I think they will be a much better football team than they were for the majority of last season, even with losing Jason Kelce on an offensive line. You look at their schedule. They, of course, Alex, open with that game in Brazil on the Friday night against Green Bay. I still don't know why the league sent such an important game down there for NFC playoff ramifications. The Eagles losing a home game against a potential playoff competitor in Green Bay, I wouldn't be happy if I was for the Eagles. Then they flip around and get to see Kirk Cousins on a primetime game yet again in Philadelphia for the 3rd consecutive year in week 2. And then they go back-to-back NFC South road games with New Orleans and Tampa. But then they have the week 5 bye. And I just ask you this from a handicapping perspective if we're looking at season-long things. You can put that schedule up there, Sean, for everyone to see. 10.5 on the Eagles for the win total. Does the early bye versus the late bye impact how you handicap anything, Alex, or does it not at all?
I think it should, right? I mean, I think that is really tough having that early bye and then just a bunch of tough games there at the end of the schedule, especially when we saw what happened last year. What about for you?
Well, with win totals, I would much rather see a team have a bye between week 8 and week 11. Those are usually the bye weeks that's like, all right, you're in a 17-game season, but if you play 7 in the front end and 10 in the back end, okay. I'd rather have more games in the more games in the front end of the
Right.
schedule than the back end of the schedule because I'd rather this team be fresh by the end of the season. I mean, Philadelphia, I don't think the Eagles are going to be capable of getting the 1 seed. I don't see that. I don't think they'll get the 1 seed. I think the 1 seed is coming either from the NFC North or the NFC West. That's where I think the 1 seed's coming from. I think you can figure out the 3 possibilities with that right now without thinking too much. But the one thing with this Eagle team is you better get off to the good start. They're right now, depending on the book, they're either a small favorite or a pick against Green Bay, depending on the book. You're going to be favored against Atlanta. I would make them favored on the road in both of those next 2 games. I don't know what the books will end up doing with that. We have to see. Again, I know there's some numbers out there right now, but we have to see what happens those first 2 weeks of the season
Correct.
before really making any definitive statements. But you better get out either, at worst, 2-2 in those 4 games. At worst, 2-2. Where if you lose to Green Bay and Brazil in a neutral, okay, you better find a way to go 2-1 of those NFC South games. Even though the one thing with the NFC South this year, other than Carolina, who is the worst team in the NFL, I think by a pretty significant margin going into the year, those other 3 teams, there are arguments to be said, hey, if someone came to me and said, hey, the Saints are going to win 10, 11 games and make the playoffs, I don't agree with it, but I could see the argument. Same deal with Atlanta, who I think is the rightful division favorite, and the Bucs, who were in the playoffs a year ago. I don't know if Baker's capable of having another season like he did a year ago, but if Baker's close, Tampa could win 10 games again, or 9 games again and be over 500. But the whole key to the operation for the Eagles, you get off to a good start, I would feel pretty good about them winning the division. Now, I don't love the price at even money. Shop around, there's some plus 115s, some plus 120s out there. Do that, but not at even. I don't think that's the best. You got to find the best price if you're going to take the Eagles to win the division.
Definitely find the best price there. And I may be on a different side. I don't know if I have them winning this division yet, but we'll break that down more when we go through all 4 of them on Saturday. Very interesting looking at their strength of schedule. Completely different sides here. So tied for 21st hardest based on the wins last year.
Okay, then what about the season win total?
Season win totals for this year, 9th easiest.
Okay, so pretty much almost the same, because you said 21st hardest, right?
21st hardest.
Okay, so that translates to about the 11th or 12th easiest. So the 11th easiest it translates to. And you said the 9th easiest
Yes.
on the season win totals. So I don't really look at this. So just real quick on just how I handicap season wins and teams now. I don't really look at the strength of schedule number because teams just change so much in this day and age. But, and I got to give Warren Sharp some credit because he was one of the first ones to publicly do this. You look at those season win totals, that's the better gauge of how
I think
strong
so too.
these schedules are going to be. So, but it'll be
So if that's the case, 9th easiest schedule.
So they're pretty close though. 9th and 11th, not that far off from each other when you're dealing with that on the easy end. You said 21st hardest, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that is the 11th easiest. So
yes.
there we go.
Yes.
My math is right there. But it'll be interesting to see with these Eagles, which is how you respond after last year's debacle at the end of the season. By the way, Jalen Hurts is 25-1 to win the MVP at the Superbook. A.J. Brown's 25-1 to be the offensive player of the year. I don't think Nick Sirianni will get any credit if they improve. I think the coordinators will. I would not bet 50-1 to win Coach of the Year. I just thought that was an interesting number, just how high it was. But when you think about it more, I don't think that's worthy of a bet. I don't think there's anyone in the awards categories that are worthy of a bet in the Philadelphia Eagles this year.
I don't either, especially because Jalen Hurts has so many weapons. A.J. Brown, of course, is an elite wide receiver, but he's got a lot of guys on that team. Yeah,
I think the only thing you can consider is, like, if you think Hurts is going to play at the level he played 2 years ago, you could make the argument for taking a Jalen Hurts flyer 25-1. You could make the argument for it. I just think there's too many guys in front of him at this point that are more likely to win the award, unless if the Eagles have a season like they did 2 years ago.
Right.
Remember, how many people expected them to be in the Super Bowl and be one pass interference call away, or one defensive hold away from getting the ball back in a 3-point game with a minute to go in the Super Bowl?
Well, thinking about it, and you may have this, but I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, go ahead.
When they had the most wins going into December, Jalen Hurts must have been in the conversation for MVP.
Well, you remember, and this was a big flashpoint on some betting shows that we listened to, and I know Sammy P, our friend, talked about this with the guys over at You Better You Bet. Jalen Hurts was for a good chunk of the season last year the betting favorite.
Okay.
And me included on this, I never thought he was winning the MVP because his numbers weren't particularly great, and the Eagles were just winning all these tight games. Now, I didn't expect the Eagles to basically become the second worst team in the NFL by the end of the season last year, but I never was buying, hey, Hurts should be the favorite. I thought if Hurts had won, it would have been a complete farce. Obviously, when it was all said and done, with Lamar winning his second one. Now, granted, I thought Lamar was a weaker MVP than we have seen in the past. I think there was again, when Mahomes has such a down regular season that he did, Allen didn't even have his best year last year as well. It was kind of a process of elimination. And, of course, Baltimore destroyed San Francisco on a Christmas night game. Remember, Brock Purdy was you were laying a price with Brock Purdy going into Christmas night last year in the MVP race.
And then, of
Lamar,
course, Tyreek Hill, we didn't.
Yeah, if Tyreek Hill didn't get hurt, that would have been a big what if, Alex, because remember, Tyreek got hurt at the beginning of December, and that was that.
Right.
But if Tyreek Hill never got hurt, he might have got there.
The more we're talking about it, the more I'm liking this 25-1, because I do expect a bounce back year for him. And if he is 100% healthy, which who knows, but you would hope to start the season, I think we could really see a good year from Jalen Hurts.
I don't mind darts. I really don't mind darts on guys who had down years. And this is, again, I don't remember what Burrow's number was, but I would look at Burrow as well as a potential one. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Parles.
And I'm Alex White. Thank you for watching this clip of Sports by the Book. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe.
We live stream the show right here every day on this channel. Also, you can catch the podcast version on your favorite podcast platform.
All the links are in the description below. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.